So the next thing up is what?
So we have an amazing panel coming up. We're excited to really round up, what are the things that we need to know about BIPOC mental health, right? What are our rights, some new laws that may have come out. And we have two amazing speakers and a really, really amazing moderator. But really quick, just wanted to shout out for giving us love on social media. Rock My Retreat said that first session was such a great start to the day. So we think so as well. So we hope y'all are enjoying it. If you are, please share on your stories, tag us at _Melanin Minds. We're using the hashtag MMMHC 2021. So that's Melanin Minds, mental health is right there.
Boom. Hello, everybody. Let's have our speakers come off of mute. Karissa, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
This is so wonderful. One, we will never stop shouting out our panelists, our speakers, our participators. We have two, our moderator and one of our panelists, streaming in all the way from their vacation spot. So we have people that are on vacations. Deniss is growing her practice right now. And with that comes, Deniss, we connected because of hiring and trying to figure out the right people to connect on your team. And again, you guys and people and women and men and non-binary and everybody else, you are literally watching CEOs do their passions, grow their businesses, perform their callings. So this is amazing. So I have a question for our moderator before I hand it over to her. You talk a lot about your passion and growing your businesses. You're in multiple things. So I would love for you to talk more about your fellowship and how you're moving and practicing, along with getting a doctorate in the next 5, I'll say 4. I feel like you're going to finish in 4 years. Put in that.
I'll take that.
Yeah, I'll put it in your universe. I would love to hear more about you and how we're connected in this way and what you're doing to be a change maker.
Oh, wow. Okay, Legina. So thank you, first of all, for having me. I was so honored to be the moderator for this panel. So my name is Karissa. I will be starting my doctorate in counseling psychology at Texas Women's University in Denton, Texas this fall. So thank you for that 4-year energy, because it's a 6-year program. And if I can knock that down, that's great. So my focus will be in Black feminist therapy and Black feminist theory growth. We don't have a lot of research behind that, and it's important that we recognize that our experiences are different. Nobody's is better than the other or less than the other, but really highlighting and really paying attention to those differences really helps us to understand. And Black feminist theory is just that, the life of Black women is important, and to highlight what we struggle with and kind of debunking those, angry Black woman notions that we hold. And so that's really my passion. Also, it's not a coincidence that Vic and I have the same last name. We are married. And so we have a really huge passion for the Black queer community, and that is where our roots are going to really start to grow here with our new practice together. And so really just highlighting that Blackness and that queerness is extremely important to us, and we're really excited to stay in that space and love in that space and grow in that space. So we're really excited for that.
Thank you so much. And y'all, if you haven't already, again, y'all just launched a new website, correct?
We did.
Yes, congratulations. We all know out here, y'all give them some parts, you know, how hard websites are to do and to do them accurately. And then once you have the vision, you find out some stuff isn't a real vision, and then you change pictures and everything. Look at all the entrepreneurs. They're like, yes, okay.
Yeah.
And then
I'm going to go ahead and give all that credit to Vic. I'm going to go ahead and give all that website credit to Vic.
I love the powerful partnership love here. I love it. And then we have Deniss on our panel from TOC Therapy. And not only is TOC Therapy on this panel, they're on a later panel later on today and are one of our sponsors. Again, everybody just shows up and shows out for us. Deniss, I'd love, actually, you know what? This is not my panel to moderate. Karissa, take it away. I'm going to get off. Like, y'all know I go into podcast and moderating mode, but this is yours, girl. I appreciate you. I love knowing about you. So pull out of these panelists what you will. Take it where you're going to go. We want to know all the tea, no shade, all the tea about therapy. So we appreciate it.
Thank you, Regina. I appreciate it. It's hard to not get in moderator mode when you're used to it, so I get it. Just quickly, I would like to start with Deniss. If you could just give me like a 1-minute quick spiel about yourself, what's going on with you, how you're, moving in your space, that would be great.
Sure. First, thank you for having me here. I'm really excited. I am currently in California. I founded and I own Talk Therapy. It's a group practice that's tailored to meet the mental health needs of BIPOC adults in California. We have been just telehealth lately, hoping to transition back to in-person soon, but a lot of the work that we do at Talk Therapy is centered on a sense of community and a sense of cultural humility as well. Understanding that being clinicians of color mean that we have a unique lived experience, and that helps our patients feel seen and validated, but at the same time, we also carry our privileges, whether that's financial, educational, or racial. So understanding that, yes, we understand certain things, but we can continue to learn and grow. And that's important for me to have in the clinicians that join the practice. I'm really excited because we actually just hired a second clinician, which is really cool. So now there's 3 of us. She's fairly new, so she wasn't able to come today, but I'm hoping that, we can continue to expand and hire more clinicians of color, because I know that that's also really difficult. And navigating and learning how to run your own practice or be in private practice as a clinician of color can also be difficult. So we want to definitely create that space. Like I mentioned, though, community is really important, and increasing access to mental health education and information is also very important. And the way that we do that is we are on Instagram. You must have seen that kind of be included in the chat now. So if you want to follow us, that's a place where we just give as much information for free as we can so that you can make informed decisions about your mental health and take care of yourself. But I'm also on YouTube. I post weekly videos on the channel Therapy Explained on YouTube. I cover all kinds of mental health subjects and issues, but with a lens of cultural humility and competence. So I always make sure to include that it's important for us to contextualize ourselves when we're talking about mental health. And then I also have a podcast. I'm the co-host of a podcast called My Therapist Friends, where it's a little bit more relaxed and we just have pretty comfortable conversations about mental health issues as people of color, and our experiences as clinicians, and kind of how our experience as people of color affect our development as clinicians. So, yeah.
Awesome, Deniss. You got it going on, girl. You're all over the place, huh? That's awesome.
I do a lot.
Congratulations on all of that, and well wishes on keeping that going. I know that's a lot. And then Vic, can you do a quick little intro?
Absolutely. So I'm Vic Doster. Right now, as Karissa said, we just launched our own practice, BPOC, Black People of Queer Experience, Therapy and Consultation. So that has been on the main front for me at this time. Also, I practice at a group practice in Frisco, Texas. It's called Reveal and Restore Counseling. I also engage with the Borderland Rainbow Center in El Paso, providing therapy at very low rates, sliding scale, scholarship-based sometimes. So that's as far as therapy. Now I'm also a fellow at the Diversity and Resiliency Institute of El Paso, where I do a lot of advocacy work, lots of training other types of medical professionals or mental health professionals on the needs and being literate in LGBTQ care and Black communities and other communities of color. And so right now, myself and Karissa are engaging in a 10-month long continuation of Black History Month, trying to really get people excited and celebrating Black history beyond just the month that we get a year, because it's way beyond that. I mean, I don't even have to go into that in detail, but that's what's on my front right now. So thank you for having me.
All righty. I would congratulate you on your endeavors. I will, because they are my endeavors. Okay, so let's get into it. So the first kind of topic that we're going to cover is the rights and laws. And I'm going to ask pointed questions, one to Deniss, one to Vic. And if we have a little bit of time, there's one more part that I would like to get into. But the first question I have is pointed more to Deniss. And it is, it's kind of a two-parter. So how does somebody find a therapist that's right for them? And then is it okay to like interview a few before deciding on what therapist or who to go with?
Absolutely. It is important that you interview your therapist. What I tend to recommend is that you sit with yourself and you ask what's important to you. What would make you feel comfortable in a room with someone? Ideally, your therapist is someone that you feel like you can tell anything to. So what do you need from that person in order to feel that way? This can be your race, age, socioeconomic standing, what values, political values, is that important to you? Religious values, is that important to you? So make a list of what really is important to you, and that will help you dwindle down the type of therapist that you might be able to see on various directories. There's Latinx therapy for Latinx, there's Melanin Minds, there's therapy for Black girls, therapy for Black men. There are a lot of directories, thankfully, that will dwindle it down to make sure that your therapist at least identifies with your race. Now, we know there's a lot more to someone's identity than that. So if more things are coming up for you that you think are important, a lot of the directories do allow you to filter through therapists based on those, like even fees. I think that's also an important part to ask yourself, what is my budget for therapy? Ideally, you're going to see a therapist every week, so keep that in mind. How much am I comfortable paying every week? And then depending on where you're at, I know in California, it can be a little bit more expensive, Northern California, even more. So come up with a budget and then let those therapists know. A lot of, I think something that Vic had mentioned was sliding scale. So basically what sliding scale means is that a therapist might say, my sessions are 150, that's what I charge, but I offer a sliding scale, which means that I'm willing to go down anywhere from 175 to like down to 80 or down to 60, depending on what their particular practice does. Everyone is different, so I'm not able to say like the lowest that you can get. At Talk Therapy, we offer as low as like 30, 40, depending on someone's financial standing. So that's pretty much what that means. So if you see that, ask that, or even ask, do you have like low rates or lower rates in therapy? And a lot of therapists also do offer free consultations. So again, at Talk Therapy, we offer free 15-minute consultations, and that's your time to ask questions. The list that you created about your values, those are good things to talk about and ask your therapist or potential therapist in the consultation. So what are your political values? How do you see your race and my race playing in a role in the therapy? Just ask them anything that is on your list that is important to you, even if it's particular like symptoms that you might be having. therapists won't provide you with an intervention during a consultation, but if you say, I'm struggling with anxiety, how do you usually work with people with anxiety, or do you have experience working with people with anxiety? And then they can tell you, yes, typically this is what I might do, or this is what my experience is. So I know it's a strange way to think about it, because we have to think of a therapist as a professional who knows what they're doing, and it feels like they have more of the power, but you have more of the power. Like, you get to decide who you want to work with, because this is your safe space. So I encourage people to be really picky about it. If one thing feels off during the consultation, address it or follow up with that therapist, or ask them if you feel like, I'm not sure that like the political values were clear, let me email them and ask them. But if it just feels off, like those 15 minutes are so important, or however long the consultation is so important, because that can also help you. The questions will give you more tangible things to hold on to, but sometimes even the vibe is part of it. Like, oh, they were kind of weird or too stiff or too comfortable for my taste. So also pay attention to how you're feeling with that person in the room.
Yeah. Awesome, Deniss. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think you said being picky. I totally agree with that. Being picky with somebody who you're going to be divulging very important information to, being, picky equals, trust, right? So the next question, Vic, so we kind of get into these rights and laws topic, in that some people don't understand what their rights are, what laws are. And I think one of the big things that a lot of people ask us as therapists is, well, who are you going to tell? Who knows this information that I'm telling you? So if you could kind of give us a little bit about what's the difference between confidentiality and privacy? What are those things? And what should somebody expect?
We're going to interject.
Yes.
We have some stuff coming in through the chat. And so because we're doing interactive and holistic, I want to make sure that we.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, definitely. And
yes.
I know you're moderating, so this is my job. So
oh, yes.
I'm
Thank
try
you.
my best. Okay. I think this question was for Deniss.
Okay.
Can you drop that list, or do you have a place where that list is available that we can put in the chat? And then we'll also pick it up, y'all, and send it in the post-conference email for people to have that list of resources. And then we have Destiny. She says, can you see the chat too?
I can, yeah.
Okay. Yep, I can see it.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So Destiny says, sadly, everywhere is expensive and insurance does nothing for the rates. Yeah, do we want to even talk on that? Just stopping there. Like,
yeah, I mean, yeah, no, yes, Destiny, yes, absolutely. It further perpetuating the financial and racial disparities, and continues to promote this notion that therapy is for the wealthy. Yeah, absolutely. Deniss, did you want to, or Vic, did you want to kind of say anything about that?
I definitely agree. It's really frustrating. It's something that a lot of, I don't want to speak for the both of you, but I feel like a lot of clinicians, we tend to feel this way. Like, we're here to serve and we want to help people. And it's hard to balance out prices and also making a living. What I tend to say is, again, ask that person, what is your sliding scale? How low are you willing to go? And be open with them about your financial status. If they're able to meet you, they'll meet you there financially. And if not, they'll provide you with a referral for, ideally, someone they should be providing you with a referral. I would suggest, if you can't find a private practice therapist that meets your budget, go to like community centers. I think, Vic, you had mentioned that you volunteer somewhere where or you work somewhere where they do offer that. So a lot of community centers or community mental health centers will offer that. Medi-Cal does also cover mental health, actually. Well, at least here in California, they do. So Medi-Cal covers your mental health services. So, if you don't know where to start, schedule a consultation with a therapist. And if they're still out of your budget, ask them. I have no problem being like, if you can afford my services, that's fine. I'm here to help you, so let me help you. Like, I don't mind providing you with clinics in your area that might be able to meet your financial budgets.
I've got some stuff to add. I'm just gonna kind of piggyback off what Deniss was saying. Also, there are some resources that are available, such as the Open Path collective referral site, and that guarantees you to be able to engage in therapy sessions for anywhere between $30 to $60. As therapists, when we list ourselves on that site, we agree to only charge within that range. With OpenPath, there is one barrier, just to be transparent, and that's paying a fee upfront. I think it's like $50, but it gives you a lifetime access to those rates as long as you basically pledge that you are in need and you can't afford the market rates of therapy. There's also some other resources. If you go on, I think it's the Black Loveland Foundation, and this is for Black women specifically, I believe, and you can get some therapy coupons, basically take it to a therapist, and I think it's maybe 10 sessions, around 10 sessions for free, to, you know, therapists will take it and then that foundation will reimburse the therapist. Also for Black men, Therapy for Black Men, they do something very similar, where they will grant scholarships essentially.
Yes. Could you put those ones in the chat too, Vic? The OpenPath?
Sure thing.
Sure, 'cause that is a really good resource for sure. Oh, thank you, Denise. So that's in the chat now, the one she listed earlier. And then Vic's are coming right up here. Yes, overall, Destiny, absolutely. It's a horrible barrier. You know, if therapists, I'm sure I'm speaking for most therapists here, if we could just do it and still make a living by, you know, free, we would do it. But that's definitely a huge barrier for many people. So yes, Vic, I'll give you just a second here. There, boom, there they are. Black Loveland Foundation, OpenPath Collective, Therapy for Black Men. Also, yes, on our website, we have a lot of resources as well, under our resources tab. So kind of circling back to the confidentiality and privacy question, this is something that we often get asked as therapists. So Vic, could you touch on that?
Absolutely. So privacy and confidentiality, there is a difference. There are many similarities though, and I will say one of the primary similarities is that as mental health professionals, as long as you are seeing a licensed mental health professional, and even I think in some states, if you're seeing somebody who's not licensed, we are held to ethics standards. And so confidentiality and privacy are one of the main components that create a safe environment for therapy. Confidentiality, essentially, it's about the engagement, the data of therapy. So nobody can know, you know, any information about even whether or not you're attending therapy. So if somebody is to call me and say, is so-and-so a client with you? I cannot say yes, this person is a client with me. I even have folks sometimes who refer their friends, and we'll get on a session and they'll say, oh, I referred my friend whomever to you, and I can't even, you know, confirm that I received a referral. Privacy is about the person, and it is a right. Let me say that again, it is a right. Privacy is the concept that everything is private. So we're not, what we talk about in therapy is not going to be discussed with others outside of therapy. There are some exceptions to that. If somebody is to report that they are going to harm themselves or others, child abuse, neglect, elder abuse, neglect, so on and so forth, those are times when we are mandated reporters. We do have to break the confidentiality, the privacy. But even then, we can only give minimal information that is required for the actual report. So we're not going to go and report that we talked about this during the last session in depth. It's just going to be the information that is needed, only the information that is needed. Keep in mind HIPAA, it's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Everything is protected by HIPAA.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. I think also too, like adding on to that, privacy is, also for those, COVID's been kind of weird where we don't go anywhere for therapy. We just log on our computer, right? But when we're in person, it's, if Deniss has a client in person, she can't control who sees that person walk into her office. And, kind of that thing as well. But it's not like that person sees the person walk in and then they immediately go in and they're like, hey, Deniss, what were they talking about? And she's like, well, that's where the confidentiality piece comes in. I cannot, explain that to you, right? So Lunis said there are more models developing as BIPOC providers enter the space. Thank you for speaking to providing service and living wages. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the more we get in there, we're getting in, aren't we? And then Vic, we just got a DM. People are filling out, contact us on your website. Yay, that's exciting. Keep going there. Okay. Oops, I just paused recording. I'm so sorry, Legina. I'm over here pressing buttons on accident. Okay. So the next part of our discussion that we're having is mental health in the workplace. And these I don't necessarily have pointed questions, just whoever kind of wants to chime in and just time mindfulness, right? I'll go ahead and ask the first one, and then whoever wants to go first, I'll let Vic and Deniss battle that one out. Importance of setting boundaries between work and other responsibilities. Okay, what does that look like for you as therapists? I think sometimes people forget, like, oh, therapists are people too, right? What are the boundaries that y'all are setting between work and other responsibilities that you have in your life? And I know Deniss is all over the place, right? We're all over the place. What are you doing to kind of juggle that?
I feel like I've talked a lot. Vic, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that one. Thank you. So boundaries, I'm going to touch on it as, from a therapist lens, but also for folks who are viewing. Boundaries are important for everyone. And you have to set boundaries to create and to foster that healthy space for yourself. And that goes for us as therapists. We have our own boundaries. Everyone's set of boundaries are different, very individualistic. So I will share some of my boundaries. I don't, engage with clients after business hours. If there is something that needs to be discussed, it can be, and it's, any agency that I engage with at this time, and we're not an emergency service, we are not equipped to provide those services. So for the most part, if folks need to discuss something that came up, I always welcome an email because an email is not going to make my phone go off at 8 o'clock at night and possibly interrupt my time with my family. But I'm not going to get back to that email until the next business day. And even then, I would prefer to discuss, depending on the content, discuss what is in the email during session, because that is what session is for. Some other boundaries, Deniss, I don't know if you want to share yours here in a moment. Some other boundaries that I have are, no contact on social media. I do not add folks. We are not, when I engage with a client, it's a therapeutic alliance. And so I do not add folks on social media, and I do not accept friend requests. And it's not that I don't like my clients or that I don't want to see what's going on in their lives. But when we start to engage in different types of relationships, it can it can be damaging to the therapeutic relationship in many different ways. Now, boundaries for everybody in the workplace, it's super important to set these. Knowing what you will and will not do at work, what's within your responsibilities. A lot of times we are go-getters. And so when our boss comes up to us and says, hey, can you do this? And can you do that? And maybe it's not within our responsibilities, but because we want to go get and give, we may kind of start to overstretch ourselves. It's important to be mindful of that. And Deniss, I'll let you go ahead and take this if you want to chime in.
Sure. I love boundaries. Boundaries are my favorite thing to talk about because we tend to think of boundaries as like walls, right? That keep us from people, that protect us from people. But I like to reframe them more as bridges. So if you can think of all of us as like little islands, right? And your boundaries are the bridges. That's what actually connects you to people in a way that feels safe, that is delineated, and that you both agree feels good to the both of you. That's what boundaries are. I agree in terms of like, as a therapist, I have 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and emails, same thing. I'm on social media, so I always say, you're all more than welcome to consume and engage with any of the content that I have, but I don't discuss clinical issues through DMs or comments. I will not recognize you as a client if you comment where I'm like, you're my favorite client, thank you. I will heart your comment or like your comment, but again, I don't go past that. And also my clients are not obligated to engage in any of my content either. The relationship is between that person and I in the therapeutic hour that we are together. Boundaries are the distances of which I get to love me and you at the same time. Yes, I love that. And I think that's very important to remember when we're setting our boundaries, because the way that I see boundaries too is that when you're setting a boundary, what you're telling that person is, my feelings and my experience are important, right? And they're so important that I'm going to take the time to establish them and to maintain them with you. Not because they're more important than yours, but because they're just as important as yours. And this is important to keep in mind when you're setting them at work and with your family, because I feel like those tend to be the hardest places to establish them, because we love our family and we do want to do well at work. But if we're burning ourselves out, it doesn't serve anybody. And there are other ways to get noticed. You can still be firm and stand up for yourself without necessarily feeling like you are being mean or rude. And there are so many healthy, wonderful ways that you can start setting boundaries, and your therapist can be a really good help in doing that.
Yes, absolutely. Boundaries are my favorite thing too, Deniss. They're really important, and I love how you use the bridge metaphor, because I think that I'm going to start using that. Thank you. I'll make sure to credit you for it though. Anything else on that topic?
One last
Either
thing I
way
do
or
want to
worse.
recommend is, I think Vic made a really good point about like emails. Even if you get them at night and not respond to them is important. So if you get an email from work, do that, or just don't set like your work email connected to your phone, or shut down those notifications from your email. But I'm also really a big fan of morning boundaries. And by morning boundaries, what I mean is like when I wake up, I'm not going to check my phone until after I have breakfast and I'm dressed. Like once I'm physically ready for work, that's when I'll go answer my text messages, I'll look at my Instagram, I'll answer client emails. So going to your phone first thing in the morning can really kind of cloud your grounding. So I am also encouraging people to try to have morning boundaries. And then meals. Meals are also a really good way to start setting boundaries. So literally schedule in your meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and do not schedule anything else, no meetings, like don't work and eat, like have actual boundaries and make sure that you are eating and feeding your body, because that's literally the basics. If you're not eating, you don't have energy. So if you're looking to learn how to establish healthy boundaries, those are easier ways to start with just the meals.
Yes, it looks like you're getting some of this. I can't see because of my background. It looks like you're getting some of this in the chat there.
Just want to add something. as folks, as we begin to set boundaries in the beginning, it's not going to feel good all of the time, especially when we're talking about interpersonal boundaries. It may feel foreign, uncomfortable, because we learn boundaries generally when we are, the basis for boundaries when we're children. And just by, watching what our caregivers, parents, and folks around us, how they engage with others. And if we have not had a good or healthy, I'll say, example of boundaries, and you start to, kind of realize that boundaries are important and implement them, people are not going to always be in favor of that, because you're changing. And maybe the things that they benefited from before, with your boundaries being passive, or however they are, they're just not going to like that. So I want to just add, when you begin to set boundaries, stay strong and stay true to yourself, because that's what's important. And I think Deniss also mentioned this, boundaries with yourself. It's also important to set boundaries with yourself, because that's when when you set boundaries with yourself, it shows others how you are going to set boundaries with them as well.
And I think, not to keep going on this one particular subject, but I did warn you, this is my favorite thing to talk about.
Yes.
Culturally, right? As BIPOC communities, we tend to be collective communities. Our family is always in our business. And so if you're starting to set boundaries with your family, that can be looked down upon. And this is also why it's important to have a therapist with the lived experience that can tell you, I get it, right? You might be living with your grandma when you're 20, 30 years old, and that's fine. It doesn't mean that you're, enmeshed, or that there's something wrong with you psychologically. Just culturally, some of these things are acceptable. Yeah, it's common that your family's going to be in your business, but how can you do that in a way that honors your family and your family values, but still is protecting your mental health? So I also did want to kind of put that in there. It might feel more uncomfortable because we're, culturally, it's hard.
Yes, I appreciate that, because that's absolutely true. And how does a good no inform a great yes? Oh, yeah. How does a good no inform a great yes?
I'm not sure if this is where we're going with that, but something that I also do tend to encourage people to do when you start is to think of boundaries. They don't have to necessarily be no's. They can be a yes, but, right? So yes, I can help you. Yes, I can support you. But if you start it, or if you finish it, or I can help you with the research and you can do the rest, or I'll be on call if you need some help, kind of yes, buts. But in the same way, when you're setting boundaries, it's not a no, right? It's that bridge. I'm not saying that you can't visit my island. It means this is the way to do it in a way that feels safe and healthy for the both of us. And that's the yes, right? Yes, I want to connect with you. And because I want to connect with you, I'm showing you exactly what that bridge looks like and how wide it is.
Absolutely. Yes, the email to vacation mode. Yep, I hear that. So the last kind of topic before we do the wrap up piece is one that Vic and I, and I'm probably sure Deniss too, after reading some of your stuff, are very vocal about. And that's mental health challenges among BIPOC community. So somebody had already put in our chat, right, a huge challenge being finances. But there's so many other challenges, unfortunately, that we're constantly having to combat. So Vic, I'm going to start with you. And so can you tell us a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on mental health for BIPOC folks specifically?
Yes, wow. That is a very, that question, an answer to that can go on and on and on, because the impact is endless. So with COVID-19, and I'm going to say not even just COVID-19, but all of the things that have happened over the past 2 years. If we think about just wherever your mind may go, you know, the murder of George Floyd and things within that realm. And this stuff has been going on for forever, right? But this was kind of, COVID times was a awakening, essentially, because a lot of folks started to get up, and even though we were all bound to our homes for a certain amount of time, and some of us still are, right? Folks started to get up and use their voices in different ways, which is great. But for us BIPOC folks, staying home and hearing everything on media, seeing, you know, anytime you open up your phone, you get on Facebook or Instagram, you see stuff going down your timeline about COVID, about, you know, George Floyd, and all of the other things that have been taking place. And so it really put us in a rut. Also, to mention folks who were experiencing intimate partner violence, domestic violence, all of the things were now non-escapable. And so our minds just constantly being flooded with all of the stuff that's been going on. Anytime you look someplace, it's right there in front of you. And the only thing that you can do is set a boundary, but even then the boundary wasn't so healthy, because, you know, setting a boundary may look like turning off your phone or uninstalling the Facebook app, but then you're still stuck at home. So how do you communicate with folks? How do you connect with folks when you can't go out and you can't go to social gatherings? You can't go to barbecues. And so it really just, it was a lot, I'll say that. But I will say one thing that did come out of COVID, and that Deniss and Karissa, I think you all may agree with me, was that now BIPOC folks are reaching out more than they ever have for therapy and for those resources, because we've kind of been pushed into a corner where we have to deal with things. And not saying that we wouldn't want to deal with things without all of this, you know, the worldwide stuff going on, but, and I think we'll get to this when it comes to stigmas and barriers, there's a lot of stuff that stops us from starting therapy and taking care of ourselves. And so just to circle back around, I will say one good thing that came out of COVID was that our people are going in the direction that we need to be going, because we deserve healing. We deserve to be and feel safe within our own mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I agree 100%. I don't think I know that more BIPOC people have been reaching out and realizing, you know, sitting with themselves and sitting with ourselves and not being able to, you know, use work as an outlet, or use going out as an outlet, or gathering with our family and friends and using that as an outlet, which I, you know, BIPOC culturally, BIPOC people, you know, that culture of Black and Indigenous people of color were very much so family oriented for the most part, and to have that gone and to have to sit with your own self was hard. And I'm glad to see that our folks are coming out and really understanding what therapy truly is, and how it can help. So this, again, I think Vic said that we could go on and on about this. Deniss, Vic, and I probably could go on and on about these barriers and these stigmas. But Deniss, could you just kind of offer us some differences between the stigmas within people of color spaces as opposed to maybe white spaces? Because they are different. And what do those stigmas kind of look like, or that you've encountered in your work as far as mental health goes?
A lot of what tends to come up, I noticed, is, again, being collective cultures, we value family. And part of that means that if something comes up, it needs to stay within the family. And the idea that you would reach out to a complete stranger to talk about your issues feels almost like, are you betraying your family? Or are you doing it wrong? And then also, again, I can only really speak to like being Latinx and how much religion plays a part in that as well. And that if there is an issue, your faith should be the first place that you go to, which is good and can definitely be a place of strength, but isn't the only place that you can go to. And again, you can always find a therapist who aligns with those values and can create that space for you. But there is that stigma of like not having to share your information with other people outside of the family, or why don't you just pray harder? Why don't you just focus more? Yeah, or if you're letting in an outsider that can do more harm. Yeah, especially if you have a therapist who just doesn't understand your experience, right? Who can make you feel like dismissed, who doesn't understand why it would be hard for you to speak up, or why it's even hard for you to go look for a therapist in the first place. And then of course, there's also the stigma of being perceived as someone who's crazy. We tend to think you should only seek out therapy if there's something terribly wrong with you, or if you're harming yourself or thinking about harming yourself. But you could go to therapy because you're looking for a partner and or having a hard time learning boundaries and learning attachment, or because you're feeling really stressed at work and you're having trouble sleeping. Like, this is actually what we tend to see in private practice. We don't work with people who are in crisis mode. We tend to do that more in community mental health. And some people do build their practices around that. But typically, yeah, it's okay if you want to go to therapy because you notice that you're more irritable, or you're in a transition in your life, whether it's a new job or college or a divorce, and you want a little bit of that support to process what's happening. But there is, again, that stigma that it needs to be really bad in order for you to go.
Yes, absolutely. There was a question, can you speak to trauma porn and naming issues for those who need help?
Me? I think I feel like that question might have come up when Vic was talking about.
Vic, was that you? I think that was right before you started, but right before you stopped.
I'll go ahead and take it. So trauma porn, it's ugly. Just I'm going to be very direct. And my understanding of it, and please, whomever asked about that, I think it was I can't see here. Whoever asked, trauma porn is something that we should not glorify. It should not be anything that we contribute to and allow to continue. My understanding of it is that it is asking folks to talk about their trauma or pain in great detail, excessive amounts, for other folks to read the parts of that person's story. The reason I'm so against it is because our stories, your story, it's not for everybody. And talking about and writing these things down and sharing them with folks on the internet can make us very vulnerable in a not a good way. With that, trauma porn can create secondary trauma for the folks reading this stuff. Secondary trauma is when you have not experienced the trauma for yourself. You weren't there when something happened, or you didn't. It didn't happen to you. But when you read other folks' stories, when you hear things, it can one, you can start to identify with that trauma based on your own experiences and exasperate what may already be going on within. Or you can, starting to take that trauma on, even if you haven't had a similar experience. I know specifically trauma porn is extremely damaging for Black and Indigenous other communities of color, because we experience the most trauma, just to be direct. And so allowing that stuff to filter through our minds and even engaging in that, it's not healthy, and I do not endorse or support it.
Is it okay that I clarify the question just a little bit?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. So I was thinking about it in the realm of a healing space. And though there are lots of healing spaces that are not exclusive to any one kind of group, sometimes when someone is going through their story, especially if you're in spaces that are mixed, right? And with mixed identity, and how do you hold someone's work in integrity and having them unpack something that's traumatic to them without it becoming trauma porn for other participants or for those who are witnessing such matters. I know it happens on the internet as well, right? And social media, and that's I know that's a marketing thing to answer, but I'm wondering about it in a therapeutic setting specifically.
That just brings me to group therapy. So, that would be, if we're engaging in group therapy, like for example, I've had groups for sexual assault survivors, where we've processed through different traumas, similar experience, where there have been different identities within the group. And my answer, I hope I answer your question with this, but as long as it's done in a safe space and with a professional who is licensed or certified, whatever is the law in the state, it can be helpful to the healing process. It's bringing me to CPT, cognitive processing therapy, which is a modality where you do write out some of the details of what's happened, and there's an impact statement and several other components, but that does get shared with other members of the group, and that can be a very healing and invigorating experience to be able to talk about those traumatic experiences in that type of setting. Deniss, I don't know if you want to add to that. I hope I'm answering your question here.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Vic is saying. It's important to have a safe space and someone who's trained and knows what they're doing. But I think also what's coming up for me is during the last summer, during the Black Lives Matter movement, when it got really big, there was a lot of people who were kind of almost like requesting the stories, like tell me how hard it's been, to be Black. Tell me about all the times that a police officer has harassed you in some way. And it's more of like, tell me about it, because then that'll make you a human being, and then I'll understand, and that'll make it valid, instead of, no, like I could just trust that if you tell me this is a thing, I'm going to trust that this is a thing. And with a lot of the racial issues, it's important to remember, for me particularly, not being a Black person, is to not censor myself. So if I'm in a room and I know I'm the most privileged, or most likely the most privileged in that room, I'm not going to censor myself. If someone is choosing to share their story, listen, allow them to process, ask follow-up questions if they seem receptive to it. Otherwise, stop. But it's like, tell me more, tell me another story. Like that can be re-traumatizing for that person. And unless that person's choosing to share their story, try not to push.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that question and giving the panelists an opportunity to then answer to that. Regina said, those of us who are older have these cultural issues. We were talking about Deniss's stigmas answer. We generally don't seek help beyond the church. Yeah, I think in Black community, I think in Latinx communities, Jesus is that person. I always tell people, you can have Jesus and a therapist, right? We see that on a shirt. People make sure you can have Jesus and a therapist. You'll be all right, right? Your prayer is probably leading you to your therapist. Okay, and I digress. Okay, so I'm trying to track time here. Okay, so there was one question that I really wanted y'all to get to, but I'll probably have to be at the next conference, right, Legina?
Yeah, we have a break coming up, but this is a great space to also talk about our vendor rooms, and all our panelists will be during the break, and everything else will be in our vendor rooms and our speaker rooms. So if you have pointed questions, again, these are resources. This conference is only starting. celebrating, amplifying the conversation. Vic already has probably a new client coming his way. Deniss, everybody in here, meditation, stretching, yoga, mental health, holistically. There's time to have these questions. So don't feel like just because we didn't get to your question, it cannot be answered. I would love closing thoughts before we hop off, just from you really quickly, if you want to wrap up.
Yes. Regina, there was a question that came in from I think before the conference began. Did you want the panelists to quickly answer that, like in 1 minute?
Yes, I feel like you were
Okay.
on point, the timekeeper, so I trust
Okay.
you.
Okay, so Deniss and Vic, this is a very loaded question. So if you can, in the best way possible, answer this quickly, that would be great. But again, like Regina had mentioned, Deniss for sure will be in a breakout room, I believe. Unfortunately, Vic and I won't be. We're going to break out to the beach after this. So if you could answer quickly, it's very loaded, okay? So it's a couple of parters. So what tactics can Black people use to work through the frustrations around Juneteenth? Now that, I will say on behalf of Vic and I, that is something we've addressed in our units that we're doing through the Diversity and Resiliency Institute of El Paso. And that is on Black and Amplified. And we really encourage people to go to that and that is we answered that question specifically. So I will go to the next part of it. And it says, for those of us living biracially or multiracially, how do we live with being both the oppressed and the oppressor at times within ourselves? I'm Black and white and sometimes feel as if my fight is bigger than me because of the ancestral and current racial conflicts that exist. So to me, what they're asking is, how do I navigate internally being part of the oppressed and part of the oppressor?
I will go ahead and start with that one. So that is, it is a very loaded question, and it's difficult to really answer for a general. I will say finding grounding and peace within who you are, how you identify, and unpacking all of your intersectionalities and understanding what those mean for you and how those impact how you perceive things, how others perceive you, how you move, how you go about things, the interactions that you have, but also what that means for your goals, what you want to accomplish. Living, being both the oppressed and oppressor, I think I personally cannot relate to this. I am Black and white. However, I myself, and this is going to differ for everybody, right? But I identify as Black. It's not that I am shying away that I am biracial, but that is just how I identify, because I don't want to think of myself. I don't view myself as an oppressor. I view myself as an advocate. I view myself as somebody who empowers, and being able to talk about my experiences in different spaces and sharing that, empowering others to also really feel comfort and peace, and find that comfort and peace within yourself and how you identify. Really facing things head on is the most simple, best way to answer this when you are ready and when you feel safe to do so, and figuring out what all of that means for you.
Yes, I think for time's sake, that's kind of where our part ends. However, I think that being a very loaded question, to whoever asked that question, I would really encourage you to process that through therapy. That is a very loaded and very heavy thing to carry. And so processing that through therapy is going to be your best bet with somebody who looks like you specifically and may have fought that fight themselves.
Karissa, whoa. You just handled that panel. That was amazing. Vic, your insight, your knowledge, the communities you're working in are just phenomenal. We're excited about the work that you're doing. Karissa, the doctorate. I know this is the whole panel, but working on a doctorate like this, I commend you. I'm excited about the change you're about to make in the world. And Deniss, we appreciate you. I want everybody in the chat right now to drop how each of you are setting your boundaries, right? Like, I feel like the conversation was really wrapped around boundaries, even toward the end when I got chills, Karissa, when you asked that last question. You're like, Legina, we need to make sure we get this in. I'm so glad you said that, right? Because that's a powerful question. And it has a lot to do with Melanin Minds, because Melanin Minds aren't just Black. It's just not Latina or Latinx or anything like that. It's everybody, every crevice you can find that's melanin, kissed by the sun, and so it's super important that we're having these conversations. I was getting chills. I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is powerful. This is needed conversations. So we deserve healing. That's what Vic said. We deserve healing. Deniss says, stop. When it's time to listen, you don't need to say anything. You just have to stop and you listen. And you don't need to make people validate how they feel or their actions or anything like that, their experiences, because it can be re-traumatizing. And it can mess with somebody's psyche as they're working through therapy. And Karissa's like, go to therapy. And one thing we've learned from this panel, if anything else, is there are some crazy resources out there. Amazing resources. I had to stop saying crazy. It's the whole thing. Amazing resources that are available to us